The last stop before the Fantasy Football Championship starts today. Week 16 kicks off with Thursday Night Football between the Chargers and the Broncos, and we are going to break down every wide receiver in the NFL this week and label them as a start, flex, or sit. 57 different wide receivers we're going to cover here, Ty. So I'm not going to waste any time. We got to dive right in if we're going to get through all these wide receivers in the next 50 to 60 minutes. So let's start in tonight's game. If you're watching this on Thursday, listening to this on Thursday Night Football between the Denver Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers. Really only three wide receivers I want to talk about in this game. I don't want to talk about a Devon Vele. I don't want to talk about a Josh Palmer. I do want to talk about Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston, though. These two appear to be the top two dogs in Los Angeles. We have Ladd McConkey labeled as a fine start. I mean, he's the wide receiver 18 on the season. He's been getting it done recently. He's a fine start for you as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Despite the struggles of this Chargers offense ever since J.K. Dobbins went down with injury, I mean, the Chargers are bottom two in success rate without J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah.
Ladd McConkey is really the only thing going for this Chargers offense right now. He's going to continue to produce no matter the matchup because, again, they have to have something happen on offense, and it's Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, and the Broncos are getting beat up by slot wide receivers this year. Pat Surtain is not on the inside. He's only played slot alignment 8% of the time this year compared to 92% on the left and right side or left and right perimeter of the field. So we don't really have to worry about Pat Surtain much in this game with Ladd McConkey. This is why we're pretty much like you can just sit Quentin Johnston because Quentin Johnston is going to be on the perimeter. Frankly, if he doesn't score a touchdown, I'm not too interested in him. He does have 8 on the season. No interest in a weak flex for Quentin Johnston for you?
Not necessarily. I again, as the outside wide receiver, like you said, it's going to be Pat Surtain. I think Riley Moss is also going to play for Denver this week too. He was close to coming back last week. Both starting corners are very good for Denver. Quentin Johnston's not going to have a 10-target game like he did last week.
No. And that's the other thing. He needs to get the volume to get there as well. So if this Chargers passing attack is going to succeed, you're going to get a few targets of Quentin Johnston that are completed and a few to Josh Palmer, but I do think it's going to have to come by Ladd McConkey in this game in slot if they're going to move the ball through the air. So let's go over to the Denver Broncos side of the ball. Courtland Sutton is, again, the only wide receiver we're really interested here. I mean, he has just been so solid this year. And like huge credit to Bo Nix for actually elevating Courtland Sutton as well. I think that plays a large role into this as well. Again, fine start this week. He's not an absolute like hammer him in. He's a stud this week. But you know what? You're going to get probably a top 15 to 20 week from Courtland Sutton and probably closer to 15 than 20. You would say so?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Courtland Sutton has had at least 8 targets in every game since week 8. He's the wide receiver 12 on the year in fantasy points. I mean, this Denver offense, despite the lack of a rushing attack, Courtland Sutton has been getting it done through the air with Bo Nix. You got to keep on relying on Courtland Sutton.
Yeah, last week was his first game with below 70 receiving yards, since week 8 against Carolina. 100, 122, 70, 78, 97, 102, but then 32 against Indy. I would be willing to bet we see a bounce back on Thursday Night Football here from Courtland Sutton. Let's keep it moving, Ty, because we have Saturday games we need to make sure we cover as well. The Houston Texans visit the Kansas City Chiefs. We won't waste any breath on Nico Collins because the dude is phenomenal. When you are a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy points per game, you are in your lineup. It doesn't matter the matchup. You are playing Nico Collins and no questions asked. That be, the Kansas City secondary is tough. Maybe can we say hamper expectations for Nico Collins this week, or does that even feel a little bit too harsh? That makes it seem like we should push him down to a fine start, but you're not benching Nico Collins or bumping him down outside of a top 10 wide receiver whatsoever.
No, not at all. I think this Kansas City secondary is a little bit of a easier opponent than last year or some other year like that. Nico's going to do his thing. It's really the other wide receiver that's really going to have a tough time in this one.
Oh yeah, so let's talk about Tank Dell then, because we have him labeled as a sit, which some people might be like, I want to play him as a weak flex though. I'm just having a difficult time seeing the upside here. I mean, we're talking about only 2 finishes inside of the top 30 wide receivers for Tank Dell this year. Like his best 3 finishes are the wide receiver 15, the wide receiver 16, the wide receiver 32. And recently he's given you the wide receiver 42, the wide receiver 43, 34, 89, 58 in his last 5 games. So against this Kansas City Chiefs defense, like, man, it feels cruel. I just have zero interest in Tank this week.
Yeah, ever since Nico Collins came back from his injury, Tank Dell is the wide receiver 65 in usage. There is no reason to start him at this point in the season when, again, every team is playing.
Yeah,
there's no reason to force Tank into your lineup.
Yeah, Bobby Slowick is running this offense through Joe Mixon. He's wanting to run the ball significantly more, and when it does go through the air, it is going to Nico Collins first and foremost. Let's talk about the other side of the ball, the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers. DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy, both in the weak flex category for us this week. You actually have DeAndre Hopkins more so in the flex category. Why is that? Because it seems like we might be getting Carson Wentz under center this week. Mahomes was a full participant in practice, though, so maybe Mahomes will actually play this week. So if Mahomes plays, I do think I'm willing to consider DeAndre Hopkins as a strong flex play, or not a strong flex play, but in the flex category this week. But again, we're recording this Wednesday afternoon, so we don't have a ton of clarity at this moment. But apparently Mahomes was a full participant. So is that what elevates DeAndre Hopkins for you to the flex tier?
Well, I had DeAndre Hopkins as a very, very weak flex this week.
Oh, you did? I was going the wrong way.
You were the one that had him in the flex territory here.
Oh, yeah, okay. Look, I got my look at this. I didn't check my note. I didn't check our rankings before this to confirm that. I knew we were opposite in some capacity. So that I put him in the weak flex, not knowing that Patrick Mahomes was a full participant in practice. I hadn't checked that element before this episode yet. So I'm willing to bump DeAndre Hopkins up to a flex category.
I still struggle to. This is the same conversation that we had a couple weeks ago when I said that DeAndre Hopkins was a sit, just because he's just cracking top 36, stats, metrics, whatever you want to look at. I don't think this is a good matchup for him either. Yes, Mahomes, I think maybe what pushes him into a firm sit for me is just the uncertainty with Mahomes, right? Like, I need to see a game of Mahomes to see how healthy he really is. I definitely have more interest in playing Xavier Worthy over DeAndre Hopkins, but I personally do, just because I think Worthy he has a little more, I shouldn't say opportunity, but I mean, Xavier Worthy last 5 games has had at least 4 catches. He's had at least 6 targets in his last 4 games. DeAndre Hopkins has been right there as well. Maybe I shouldn't really even say that Xavier Worthy is really a guy that I would want to start over Hopkins. Yeah, I don't have interest in either of them. Maybe that's the best way to say it.
I mean, they feel like, again, if Mahomes plays, and this Houston Texans secondary has been getting chewed up a little bit recently. Like, I'm okay bumping Hopkins up to a flex play, but he's like the bottom of that tier, and the top of this tier is kind of how I feel about it. Xavier Worthy, until Mahomes can connect on a deep ball with him, I just don't have any interest whatsoever. I mean, Mahomes' deep ball accuracy has just been, I don't know what's happened. I don't know what's happened.
I wouldn't necessarily put it on Mahomes. I just don't think he has, with his offensive line, he just does not have the ability to put a good ball downfield.
I feel like that's slightly a cop out. I feel like that's.
He has no left tackle. They have to play Joe Tooney at left tackle.
I still think it's a bit on Mahomes, one of the most accurate deep ball throwers that we used to see, and now he can't. Now he can't hit Xavier Worthy. I mean, we're like, his last 8 deep ball attempts have just been like, what is going on? Granted, a handful of those have been on Xavier Worthy, but I digress. Yeah, I have no interest in Xavier Worthy. If you want to play him because of the matchup as a weak flex play, again, it's a very weak flex play. You could probably put DeAndre Hopkins into either category as well. Let's talk about the other Saturday game, though, Ty. The Pittsburgh Steelers visit the Baltimore Ravens. If George Pickens, it seems like George Pickens isn't going to play. Deepak Shona, based on his George Pickens' hamstring injury, he's suggesting the data presents the fact that he probably won't suit up in week 16. So that's why you don't see him on your screen here. We're going to go with that. Deepak is a guy that we trust around here, and I think highly of his work, and we'll take his word on George Pickens potentially being out. So we won't waste too much time on Pittsburgh wide receivers because I don't want to play anybody that's not named George Pickens on that team. So let's talk about the Ravens wide receivers. And the only two that are worth talking about here, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman. Let's start with Rashad Bateman because he had the big week last week, 2 touchdowns last week, 80 receiving yards, caught 3 of his 5 targets as well, I should say. But still no interest in Rashad Bateman this week against the Steelers.
He feels like another Quinn Johnson, just on a better offense. Just that he needs to capitalize on just like the very opportunistic targets that he gets. I mean, against the Giants, it's a deep bomb that he gets, and then it's one in the back of the end zone. And now you're going up against Pittsburgh. There's nothing there for me to feel comfortable with it.
I will say Rashad Bateman has finished as a top 30 wide receiver in three of his last 5 games. If that interests you anymore at all.
No.
Okay. All right. I figured so. I have Rashad Bateman as to set this week as well. I'm not looking to put him into my flex spot at all. Zay Flowers, though, a fine start here. And I think he's like, I don't know if he's a poster child of a fine start, but like Zay Flowers, like the week where it's like, man, against Pittsburgh, is he just a flex play? I don't know. It's a week when you question him when he's going to give you, 20 plus, right? Cameron lucked out last week, and Zay Flowers was one of the only Baltimore Ravens players to not catch a touchdown. But of course, this will be the week where he catches 2 and goes for 125 yards, right? Like that's what it feels like with Zay Flowers. So he's a fine start. He'll probably fall between like the wide receiver 23 and the wide receiver 30 in my rankings. But like, I'm not, he's a fine start. Like that's it.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead. Throw your counter.
Just because Lamar Jackson in this Baltimore offense against Pittsburgh, Baltimore is not the Baltimore offense that we know when they play Pittsburgh. I mean, Lamar Jackson, his last 2 games, a 57.9 completion percentage, a 48.5 completion percentage in their first game earlier this year. So I'm expecting just a low-scoring game that Zay Flowers, I think you can still fire him up. I'm just going to put him down into the flex spot just because I don't think that he has massive upside. He hasn't exactly like lost you a week over the last month or so. I mean, he's had like 11, 10, and 11. So he's not costing you anything. But with this matchup against Pittsburgh, I don't know what the upside is for Zay this week.
Oh, which okay, that's also a fair way to look at it. If you're looking at it based off of previous matchups, if you're anticipating this being a low scoring game, then yeah, I mean Zay might give you another 10 and 11, but that's also only the flex territory for him. So yeah, I mean you could totally look at it that way. And again, like I said, the wide receiver 23 to 30 in my rankings, that would put him in flex territory technically. So like Zay's one of those guys where like I'm gonna put him in as a fine start, but like does he teeter into the flex tier for me? He's definitely at the bottom of that tier for me. I think that's a fine way of putting it. Alrighty, before we move on to the Sunday slate, though, want to remind you to subscribe over here to our YouTube channel. We are bringing you fantasy football content multiple times throughout the week. We're going to be with you all throughout the offseason as well, covering the NFL draft, covering dynasty formats. We got a lot of great content planned for you coming up as well. So if you're a fantasy football junkie, this is the place you want to be. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications as well so you know when all of our newest videos are up. We can welcome you into being a part of the fellowship, as we now have dubbed it over the back half of the season here. Sunday slate tie kicks off with the New York Giants visiting the Atlanta Falcons. Let's start with the Falcons wide receivers in this game because Michael Penix Jr. will be starting at quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons this week. 14 games into Kirk Cousins' $180 million contract. They've said they've had enough. I can't blame them. I honestly can't at this point. I know it. Look, should they have beaten the Raiders by more than they did on Monday Night Football? Yes, they should have. But at this point in the season, though, the Bucs are red hot. If the Falcons are falling further out of playoff contention, despite winning on Monday Night Football, why not see what the rookie can do? Why not let Michael Penix step out there and rip it around the yard a bit? I think for me, it brings Drake London down from a must start to a fine start for me. So
yeah.
because I feel like, so again, if we were to look at Drake London as a must start, he's at the bottom end of that tier for me. He's definitely not towards the top of that tier for me. But for me, he's a must start because he's been giving you that steady, reliable production. It hasn't been like upper echelon alpha stuff. I mean, like, okay, spoiler alert, we're going to have AJ Brown as a must start later, but it's not like AJ Brown have been playing great as of recent, but yet we're considering starting him every week, right? But because of the uncertainty with Michael Penix, how he's going to look first game as an NFL starter during the regular season, it's enough to just move him down to the fine start. I mean, he's definitely much better than a flex this week, but Drake London, a fine start. What are your expectations for him?
Really the same as they were with Kirk. I mean, because I think that there's more to this quarterback situation in Atlanta than just Kirk Cousins not playing well. And I know that Michael Penix is getting a really, really, really nice matchup right off the bat against the Giants. But I don't necessarily think that Penix takes London down a substantial amount, because I had already thought of him as Drake London as a fine start with Kirk Cousins. So this doesn't really like change a whole lot for me.
Yeah.
There is just maybe a bit more uncertainty now, just because we've known what we've been getting with Kirk Cousins has just not been good. We have no idea. Like, for all we know, it feels like people are talking about this situation in Atlanta as if it's a guarantee that Michael Penix is going to be better than Kirk Cousins.
I don't know if it will.
Right, exactly. What if Michael Penix isn't better than Kirk Cousins right off the bat? So I think
I think he will be right off the bat. Like,
I think there's going to be growing pains.
Right. He could perform to the same level.
Yeah.
But like, are they going to blow? Is he going to blow Kirk right out of the water right away? Like, I would probably bet against that. And like, that's nothing against Michael Penix. That's just like, let's keep our expectations like at a reasonable level for a rookie.
Right. So Drake London was a fine start for me with Kirk, still a fine start with Penix. Mooney is Mooney was already kind of in that low end flex territory for me. Ray McCloud, I'm like,
we don't need to worry about Ray McCloud. Let's not get cute. Right. That's people want to get cute. Let's not get cute with Ray McCloud. Right.
Exactly. But yeah, Drake London, fine start. Darnell Mooney, I think you can fire him up if you really are desperate enough. But man, you're in the semifinals of your playoffs and you're starting Darnell Mooney. I think we got some questions.
Yeah, right. You probably have a handful of other running backs you could probably play in that flex spot.
Yes,
instead of Darnell Mooney. So I want to know for you. Let's move on to Malik Nabers and the New York Giants. What makes him a fine start versus a must start for you? Because I have Malik Nabers in that fine or in that must start category, just based on the volume he's been seeing in a fine matchup with the Atlanta Falcons here. But he's just a fine start for you. So what keeps him out of that must start tier?
Well, you said it. He's gotten like 13, 10, and 14 targets in his last 3 games. He had 8, 5, and 10 receptions in those games as well. I think what made the difference last week was that he found the end zone.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's what keeps him in a fine start for me, is just that that's the red zone touchdown upside from Malik Nabers week in, week out, because of this quarterback carousel that the Giants continue to put themselves through, because Drew Lock is starting this week now.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
What gives us the best chance to lose? And it's surprisingly not Tim Boyle. It's probably actually Drew Lock.
Somehow, some way, it is not Tim Boyle. So again, I just think
Tim Boyle out there though. I want to see Tim Boyle slinging around.
Can you imagine if Tim Boyle beats the Falcons?
That's what I want. I want Tim Boyle out there to beat the Falcons.
Give me chaos. I want. Again, I just think I think Nabers is not going to find the end zone. He's still going to see the volume, but I just don't think he finds the end zone.
Which is fair. At the end of the day, if you just come back to that reality of Malik Nabers will give you the volume, but in order to be a must start, upper echelon, elite alpha kind of player, you do need the touchdown and like actual, volume of yardage to go with it as well. Yes. So that's what would keep Malik Nabers as a fine start for you, for Cameron, for probably a majority of other people in the industry as well. That's just one where I'm like, I'm willing to bet on the talent here. But now that you say Drew Lock is in, I got no gripes with you keeping him as has a fine start. Let's move on to the Chicago Bears taking on the Detroit Lions at Soldier Field. Amon-Ra St. Brown, must start. Fire him up. No questions asked. He's a top 5 guy this year. You're playing him no matter what. Jameson Williams falls into the flex category for us. Has been getting the volume over the last few weeks. What has he seen? 6+ targets in 4 straight games now. I'm okay playing JMO against the Chicago Bears, but I'm okay doing it, but I'm not excited about it because I don't think I'm going to get the explosive, 78 yards and a touchdown kind of a week from him.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Do you have anything else you want to add on JMO? I mean, like that's just like kind of where we're at. It's like, is he going to get 7 targets, catch 5 of them for 60 yards and no scores? Like if he gives you 10, 11, great. But like, I'm not expecting him to blow me out of the water this week with one of his, phenomenal, mind-blowing games.
No, I mean, ever since the beginning of the season, we have yet to see that kind of game from Jameson Williams. He against Jacksonville, 124 and a score. But ever since then, it's been 5 catches for like 60 yards. So we're talking in some weird way, we're talking about another Zay Flowers here.
Right.
Just based on recent performances.
Yeah.
So I think they're
box score fantasy wise too, not like overall player wise, but
correct.
What they offer in fantasy. Right.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you can, but I feel like that flex territory for me with these 3 players already, Darnell Mooney, Jameson Williams, and Keenan Allen, I feel like if we're throwing them into our flex spots, there really is just no other option that we have on our team.
Yeah, so let's move on to the Chicago Bears wide receivers then, because you mentioned Keenan Allen as a flex. We have DJ Moore as a fine start, Rome Odunze as a weak flex. Is that the order you prefer these guys this week? DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze? Despite Keenan having the big week again against Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, it's really as simple as like DJ Moore is getting design touches out of this offense.
Yeah,
Keenan Allen is really going to take whatever kind of scramble drill Caleb is going to do every single play. That's what it feels like. And Rome Odunze, if Caleb is protected and he sees Rome downfield, he's
firing Rome's way. Yeah. I mean, he's throwing confidently Rome's way. I mean, that's the thing I was at least encouraged by against the Vikings was like Caleb Williams. There was a few times he stepped up in the pocket and just threw a rocket to Rome over the middle. Now, it wasn't always the most accurate thing in the world, but like at least he was willing to throw to Rome and had the confidence to at least give him a chance to make a play like that. That was at least encouraging to me, but yeah, I 100% agree. It's DJ Moore who's getting the design touches. I mean, he's going to get you plenty of PPR points. He's a PPR scam at this point when you look at all the screens they're running for him. I mean, it's like literally like what they like. It's like what they're trying to do with Deebo Samuel in San Francisco, except like the target version of that, right? Like,
yeah, right.
Just get him as many design touches with the ball in his hand and let him run.
I'm pretty sure he had a carry or 2 as
a halfback. I saw. I remember that specifically because I thought it was DeAndre. I didn't think it was DeAndre Swift, but I saw. I'm like, wait, DJ Moore actually got that, and he ran in between the tackles on that play. What are we doing? So yeah, it's DJ Moore, like you said, DJ Moore who's getting the design touches. It's Keenan Allen who's kind of getting the scramble drill. If Caleb's picking up pressure, he's the immediate check down guy. And then Rome Odunze, if he could rip off a big play or 2, you're in business there. But fine start flex, weak flex, I think is very appropriate for those 3. The Arizona Cardinals take on the Carolina Panthers this week. I can't. We got Marv and Adam Thielen in the same tier, man. Do you think
what a world?
I was going to say, was that on your bingo card to start the year that we both have Marv and Adam Thielen in the flex territory this week?
Ooh.
I mean, it's just not been great for Marv, man. I hope it gets better, but I fear this is where we're at with Marv. He's just like stuck in this flex tier with Darnell Mooney, Keenan Allen, and Adam Thielen. It stinks, man. It really does.
It's brutal. I feel gracious giving him this flex here. Because he had 12 targets against Minnesota and found the end zone, but like he hasn't topped 60 yards since week 9, hasn't topped 5 catches since week 9. Like it's not good. Marvin Harris, I am confident in saying that if you have Marvin Harrison on your team, you are definitely in your consolation bracket.
Oh, yeah.
And at this point, we are just trying to avoid the punishment.
Right. We are avoiding the toilet bowl at this point with Marvin Harrison Jr. Yeah, my guess is that you did not make the playoffs if you took Marv at that 1-2 turn this year. Yeah, has not given you more than 8.9 fantasy points in 3 out of his last 4 games. That's not a player you can reliably put into a fine star category there. So you get Adam Thielen then against the Cardinals. Okay, I'll say this first. We got Michael Wilson and Jalen Coker in the Sidham tier. That's just that's more of a don't get cute with those guys. I don't want to waste too much breath on them. Adam Thielen, he's getting the volume still. What keeps him out of the fine start category?
I think it is just the floor that we now have seen with Adam Thielen, right? His first game back, he was on limited snaps. Then he had 2 good games. But we saw what the floor is, right? When Bryce Young struggles, Adam Thielen is not going to put up the same kind of numbers, right? 5 catches, 51 yards. That was his week. So it's not the worst week, but it's not going to really help you out at all. I think Adam Thielen, I don't want to simplify it as just that like this Carolina offense kind of came back down to earth last week, and you should reevaluate what you think of the Carolina Panthers, but like I said, we now know what the floor is, and it is a pretty low floor.
And that's about it. Adam Thielen could come on and get you another 11 targets, catch 9 of them for 70 yards this week, and be a fine start. But at the end of the day, I don't feel comfortable pushing him into the wide receiver 2 category. So for me, he is going to be a fine flex play this week. I would agree with you there. The Los Angeles Rams visit the New York Jets. Puka Nacua is a must start. Cooper Kupp is a fine start. They are both getting the volume. Cooper Kupp, yes, I know he put up a goose egg on Thursday Night Football against San Francisco in Week 15, but he has been a top 12 wide receiver in 4 of his last 7 games, 8+ targets in all but 3 games since returning from injury in Week 8. I was questioning whether I should put Cooper Kupp into the must start tier. I think I'm fine with him as a must start or as a fine start, excuse me. But I have my questions of like, actually, is Cooper Kupp actually a must start based on the volume he's been getting and the production we've actually seen? I hate asking the question again, but what prevents him from getting that necessary bump into the must start tier? Is it just that Puka Nacua is already there and he's sucking up half the volume too? I mean, it might be as simple as that.
I think it is actually as simple as that. The more that I think about it, I don't think we can simplify it as just that like Puka Nacua is the 1, Cooper Kupp is the 2, and Kyron Williams is going to get his. So then Cooper Kupp is going to get, chopped a little bit there. But like something about this Jets matchup. I know that like this Jets defense is not what they used to be.
Sure.
But something tells me that just it's Puka Nacua in this offense that is going to give you the production that you want from a Rams wide receiver. And that may be because he's utilized downfield more.
Right.
I really don't know what it is, but I do know that Cooper Kupp just does not offer the same kind of upside that we've known him to have for the past couple of years.
Yeah, 8+ targets in six consecutive games. Now for Puka Nacua, 8+ targets in 7 of his last 8. He's very clearly getting the volume. He's been a top 10 wide receiver in 4 of his last 6 as well. That's what it is. It's Puka Nacua 1, Cooper Kupp 2, and they're both great. They're both great fantasy options. They are both starts in your lineup. It's just that Puka Nacua fits that alpha tier volume production just a hair more than Cooper Kupp does, and like Cooper Kupp is definitely at the top end of this fine start tier, but man, I did have my questions whether we should bump him up to a must start. You and Cameron, though, have Devontae Adams listed as a must start this week. I don't know if I'm there with you. He's probably at the top end of this fine start tier. I know it's been really good for Devontae Adams recently. Again, 9 for 998 and 2 against Jacksonville, 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games, 11+ targets in 5 of his last 6. Like, I get it. I'm ready for this to be the Garrett Wilson game, though, that takes us by surprise. I'm probably more of a late adopter when it comes to players like Devontae Adams when they put up this massive game, having like a decent string of success. This is always my worry of like, yeah, is he going to let me down though? I'm okay putting him as a must start. for me, he's just at like the tippy top of the fine start tier, I think.
Sure. I think if I can be honest,
You can be honest. You can always
I
be
think
honest. I wouldn't like you if you weren't honest.
we shouldn't lie here. That's
Right.
not
It's
good
not a
for the
value
fan.
we promote.
I think you're putting a little too much weight just based on the last game. Because
What do you mean by that, though?
Because obviously Devontae Adams is not going to put up 200 yards and
No.
2 scores again.
No. I agree with that.
But the dude is a top 5 wide receiver in usage since he's joined the
Right.
Jets.
Which is, I can get behind that. I'm all for that. I'm just ready for this to be the Garrett Wilson game of the week. I'm like, yep, Devontae Adams, I'm all in, baby.
If Devontae Adams, I'm just going to read off his stat line from week 13 against the Seahawks. 5 catches, 12 targets, 66 yards, and a score. 17.6 points on that week. Sure, that could push him into that fine start category, but for me, he is either at the very end of the must start or he's the first wide receiver in that like fine start category. Like,
Right.
Here.
Yeah. Right. And that's, the volume is just so undeniable, man. I mean, that like I pull up his box score again, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like he's 22 plus in 5 of his last 7.
Yep.
At that point, yeah, I think he probably is a must start. You're right. I just couldn't get myself there because this is the fantasy football player in me though, right? Of like, what if this is the Garrett Wilson week instead? Like, this is me. Like, I can look at the numbers and analyze it for you all. Then this is just like the gut feeling fantasy manager in me that just like, but what if? But Garrett Wilson is still a fine start this week, regardless. No way we're pushing him up into a must start, but he's a fine start this week.
So maybe if Devontae, I know we've been talking a long time about Devontae Adams, but if Devontae Adams' floor is a fine start,
oh yeah, I'm not pushing Devontae Adams out of your lineup by any means. We're debating hairs here. We're splitting hairs. I mean, it's Devontae Adams is a play that you start him this week. It's the question of do you trust him as a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2? And I think he's probably going to be a borderline wide receiver 1 for me. But I get if you want to put him in that, he's going to fall between 11 and 14 for me probably.
It all makes sense. It's because you lost to Cam last week in fantasy.
No,
Devontae Adams. That's why.
Partially. Like I said, it's the fantasy football player in me. I just hope that people can appreciate that. The Philadelphia Eagles visit the Washington Commanders this week. AJ Brown is a must start. Devonta Smith falls into the fine start category. Last week was his first game with more than 7 targets since week 3. 109-1 on the week, caught 11 of his 12 targets. Anything you really want to add on Devonta Smith there? He to me is like, I don't want to call him Zay Flowers plus in terms of like a fantasy box score, but there's always the fear that he like gives you the 4-point dud or he gives you the 27-point explosion, but you're going to play him because you're probably just assuming he's going to give you 12.5.
Well, I think we can simplify this to between Saquon Barkley, AJ Brown, and Devonta Smith, 2 of them will feast, 1 of them will not, right?
Yeah.
Last week we saw it was an AJ Brown, Devonta Smith game. In previous weeks, we've seen a Saquon Barkley and AJ Brown game. We've seen Devonta Smith and Saquon Barkley games. I think you do have to put Devonta Smith into that fine start category because of the upside that he has, and the offense that he's in. There is just a little bit of a scary floor when it comes to Devontae Smith.
Totally. It's a terrifying floor because when you need him most, and this week is unfortunately going to be the week that he probably craps the bet. Now that I've said that, go ahead, fire up Devonta Smith this week.
Right. Wide receiver 1 on the week.
25 plus this week. Yeah, go ahead, fire him up now. So that's all I really needed to do. I just needed to get that out into the universe. So now Devonta Smith can go nuts this week. I do want to spend a little bit of time on Terry McLaurin because people are going to look at this and they're going to say Terry McLaurin is a fine start. The dude is the wide receiver 5 on the year. He has been on fire recently, 21 plus in 3 straight games now. He's a fine start. He should be a must start. This Eagles secondary is so tough, though, man. I mean, they are no joke.
I'm pretty sure they held Terry to just one target before the third quarter in their first matchup earlier this year.
Which is nuts.
Nutso. Eagles defense since week 9. They are first in defensive EPA per play. They are first in defensive EPA per drop back.
Oh.
Teams cannot play against this Eagles defense. So, yeah, it's Jaden, but Jaden struggled against that Philly defense the first time. I would not be surprised if he struggles again.
I mean, Lincoln is a tough place to play. So I get it if, you're a rookie and you're playing there and you're still getting acclimated to the league. I get it, but like you have to have a little bit more comfort at home maybe, but this Eagles defense, man, is just they're playing a different level of football right now. And it is unheard of. So Terry McLaurin, you're still firing him up this week. I mean, he's been too good to not play, but this Eagles defense is playing so well that you need to hamper your expectations from that must start category to just a fine start this week. Let's take a quick break, Ty. We're through 8 matchups. We got 8 more coming up after a break. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. 8 matchups down, 8 matchups to go. I think we're a little bit over halfway through our 57 wide receivers we are covering here, Ty. I didn't do the math over the break, but we're going to move on to the Cleveland Browns taking on the Cincinnati Bengals this week. And I want to start with the Cleveland Browns because Jameis' time is over. Moment of silence for Jameis Winston's time as a Cleveland Browns starter.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're not gonna miss it. I'm gonna miss it a little
bit. At all, man. Because
the vibes are immaculate. What are you talking about?
It's unfair to Jameis, but it's because we have an insufferable third member of this podcast that goes, guess who's 4th in targets? Guess who's 4th in points per game? Yeah, I'm sick of the Jerry Jeudy talk from Mr. Cameron Lawrence. I'm ready for it to be over.
I mean, Jerry Jeudy, 85 plus in 4 of his last 5, 100 plus in 3 of those 4 games since we.
Yeah, but who's starting now?
12 in receiving yards per game, second to only the other wide receiver in this matchup, Jamar Chase, wide receiver 3 in fantasy points per game.
No, who's starting now?
Yeah, it's DTR. Right, Jerry Jeudy's a flex play for me this week. I have no interest in starting him as a wide receiver 2 this week in any league.
It's a very risky flex. I mean, DTR as the quarterback of this Cleveland offense is just.
And that's saying something with how pitiful this Bengals defense has played.
I know. Oh man.
Like, I like the fact that DTR is playing and we have to bump Jerry Jeudy down to a flex after the run that he's been on against this matchup with the against a red hot Cincinnati Bengals offense. I mean, it feels kind of dumb, but that's how much faith we have in DTR. It's like negative 25% confidence we have in Dorian Thompson-Robinson as the quarterback for this team, which is why we also have no interest in Elijah Moore this week.
I'm surprised we even have him on this with DTR.
So I originally had Elijah Moore as like a weak flex consideration, but then I remembered, was brought back to my senses that Jameis is not starting and there's no reason for him to touch your lineup. Jamar Chase, yes, overall wide receiver 1 this year by a mile and a half. No question. You're playing him. Yep. T Higgins though, a little bit of an interesting case here. He hasn't been like astronomically great, but he's been, again, he to me feels like the poster child of a fine start this week, where he's probably going to give you 15 plus. The volume's going to be there for him. but he's only been limited to 5 or less receptions in 3 of his last 4 games. He's getting it done through the air and in the end zone with Joe Burrow, though. So I'm just not worried about it with how well Joe Burrow was playing. He's like the epitome of a fine start for me. I'm not forcing him in, but he's definitely better than a flex play. He's locked into my wide receiver 2.
Yeah, when you think of wide receiver 2s in fantasy football, right?
Wide
receiver 13, wide receiver 13 to 24, T. Higgins.
Right. That's literally the first name that probably comes to mind towards the top of this tier, even.
And if it doesn't, you may not know ball. Sorry.
Yeah, right. Not only wide receiver 2 on the NFL field, but in fantasy rankings as well. Relatively quick and easy game to kind of capture there. It's the one on one side, it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and on the other side, it's Joe Burrow. You play the 2 Bengals, and you have a bit more questions about the Cleveland Browns pass catching options there. The Tennessee Titans visit the Indianapolis Colts. I'm not really interested in any of these wide receivers in this game, if I'm being perfectly honest. You got Calvin Ridley, who I think is a flex play, but it really hasn't been that great for Calvin Ridley, actually. He only has 1 game with more than 7 targets in his last 5 games. Not exactly the volume hawk that we once hoped he would be without DeAndre Hopkins. He gets squeaky wheel, got the grease, a few weeks back, but it's kind of been a downward trend here for Calvin Ridley. And it's not like the Colts are like leaking points to wideouts, and they're 23rd in half PPR fantasy points given up to the position this year. Yeah, Calvin Ridley's like the middle to bottom of this flex tier for me, if I'm being perfectly honest.
I would agree. I mean, we're talking about Mason Rudolph, right? Like we there's just nothing there for me to get super excited about. I mean, Calvin Ridley, when Mason Rudolph was playing earlier this year, Calvin Ridley was putting up a ton of targets, but it's kind of ironic that we've got the 2 quarterbacks that like can target their wide receivers like no tomorrow, but
yeah,
there's no guarantee that they're actually going to be like completed or anything like that. So
right.
I think flex is kind of that perfect spot for Calvin Ridley of just like, he'll be looked at a ton, but there's no guarantee that like they're going to go anywhere or that they're actually going to be caught.
Yeah, Nick Westbrook-Ikine, if he's not catching the touchdowns, no bueno, 0 interest whatsoever. You all got suckered into actually believing that he was going to be a thing after 8 games with a touchdown. Like we just thought he was just going to continue that. Like I'm sorry. Like that was the easiest rug pull of my entire life, where he goes 8 games and scores 8 touchdowns in those games, and everyone's like, "Yeah, I'm in." It took you 8 games to believe in him. Don't start now.
Right. Well, I think it's funny too that like throughout the entirety of this year, the fantasy community has hoped for like the breakout wide receiver on waivers. We had like the Cokehead era with Jalen Coker earlier this year.
Yeah.
With the Nick Westbrook-Ikine.
We're back, baby. No Xavier Legette this week. We're back.
we had the Marquez Valdes-Scantling bit too.
Hey, you know what? There's a case. But
there's stop. But the real answer, granted, a little bit different because he had an injury. It was actually old man Adam Thielen.
Right. That's who it was all along. Right. That's who it was all along. Yeah, just go with the old reliable Adam Thielen. He was the one who was going to pull through for you there. The Colts wide receivers, though, Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, we both have them as weak flexes this week. Part of it is the Titans have just been getting beat up on the ground a bit more than through the air recently. I mean, through the last 5 weeks, they're still like towards the top of the pack in terms of fantasy points given up to wide receivers. But, Anthony Richardson at the helm, just in terms of his arm talent, just doesn't spark a lot of confidence in either of these guys. Could you bump Josh Downs up to a flex play? Maybe. I guess for me, they just feel much more comfortable in like the weak flex tier. And I think I feel better about the guys in the flex tier ahead of them. I don't have a case to push them up higher, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Same here. I just don't know what kind of Anthony Richardson we're going to get. Right. Like his first game back as a starter was very, very good. But then since then, it's not been great.
No. I mean, Pittman has seen 7+ targets in each of his last 4 games. So he's getting the volume, right? But he's only had 1 game with more than 60 receiving yards. So it's not like he's racking up the yards for you or anything. It's been better in the second half of the season, 40.7 yards through the first 9 weeks. I mean, he only had like 2 games with more than 40 receiving yards But then, the last 6 weeks now, 16.5 yards per game, but it's still not doing anything for you. It's not enough to get a bump into your lineup. And then Josh Downs, it was only his 4th game with less than 12 fantasy points this year last week, 3 for 32 on 8 targets. But again, which Anthony Richardson am I getting? Am I getting one that's going to knock my socks off? Or is it okay, yeah, there's still some growing pains here. And, we all might have gotten a little bit excited a little bit too quickly.
I mean, Richardson, the last 3 games, has not had a completion percentage higher than 50%.
Oh,
hasn't even topped 172 yards in those games either.
Jeez Louise. Yeah. Which is just tough. It's tough to be a productive wide receiver when that's the level at which your quarterback is playing. Again, it's necessary for Anthony Richardson's growth and development. We'll take the hurdles as they come, but in terms of talking about fantasy wide receivers, I mean, it just doesn't do any favors for either of these guys. So we'll move on to the Minnesota Vikings visiting the Seattle Seahawks, which there is rain forecasted for this game. And it's not just like at the start. It's like as of Wednesday, it seems like it's going to be the entire game, which could impact the passing attack. Doesn't eliminate the fact that Justin Jefferson is still a must start. No questions asked there. I do want to talk about Jordan Addison though, because over the last 4 or 5 weeks here since week 11, Justin Jefferson, 29 receptions for 412 yards and 3 touchdowns, compared to Addison's 30 receptions for 473 yards and 5 touchdowns. Addison's actually been, it's a sample, right? He's been outperforming Justin Jefferson, and Addison's done that on the back of a couple, massive 100+ yard games. But Jefferson's a must start, and we have Addison down in the flex category. What keeps him out of the fine start?
The weather.
Great. Is that all it is for you?
That's what it is for me.
Okay. All right. You're not expecting the deep ball attack to be as effective for the Vikings this week.
No, not at all. I don't even think it's going to happen for Seattle.
Okay. Interesting. We'll get to Seattle, but that's the only thing is Justin Jefferson is probably going to be working the middle of the field more, and Addison's not going to get as many shots down the sideline like we've been seeing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I think you could bump Addison up to a fine start if you want. We saw a few manufactured touches for him against Chicago on Monday Night Football, but it's just a question of, is Kevin O'Connell going to incorporate more of that, or is he just going to manufacture everything for Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson instead? You look like you're sitting on something there. That's why I paused. You got you're like the emoji with the 2 eyes and the I know. I don't know how I feel. I look so stupid on YouTube, but
I don't know if we can really have any, man, calling Jefferson a must start in this game. I feel like he's a fine start.
What?
Dude,
Jefferson is set it and forget it.
What if we get a monsoon?
Okay, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We're recording this on Wednesday. We're doing what we can with what we get.
I just don't want people to come back and be like, these guys told me that I couldn't pick Jefferson out of my lineup.
Justin Jefferson the week before the fantasy championship.
I'm true. Fine. Sure.
Would you actually play any of those dudes over Justin Jefferson in the fine tier?
Quinn Johnson, Tank Dell, Rashad Bateman, Ray McLeod, Michael Wilson.
Stop. You're reading the Stidham tier. Get out of here. JSN and DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, I think, is just like a legit flex at this point. I think we need to give up expectations on DK Metcalf. He is clearly not 100% healthy still. It's been a really, really rough stretch since he's come back. It's like flex at best for him. But Jackson Smith and Jigba, again, is this just a weather thing or that he gets bumped down to a fine start? Because he's been on fire. Like, even Cameron says he's just a fine start in this game. And that's coming from a dude who has been again, if he's not talking about Jerry Jeudy, he's talking about JSN.
That's true. Cam, I hope you're listening, and I hope I'm right when I speak for you on this. It is the weather.
Okay. So hamper your expectations because of the weather. We're not going to give you all the phenomenal stats and details because JSN, I mean, his last 4 games have just been nuts where it's 25 receptions for 316 and 3 touchdowns. The Vikings are allowing the second most yards to slot wide receiver. So it seems like this could be a great game for Jackson Smith and Jigba, but yet that the rain could have an impact on this game. I had Jackson Smith and Jigba as a must start. I was like, you know what? If they're going to manufacture anything short and over the middle to him, it could be a 7 reception game, and it might not be a ton of yardage. But if he finds the end zone, it could be a great day. But I also get why you want to just limit him to a fine start as well. The New England Patriots visit the Buffalo Bills. You're not playing anybody in this matchup except for Khalil Shakir.
Yep.
Fair enough. Like, I don't want to just leave it at that and move on, but like Keon Coleman isn't reliable enough. He only gave you 1 reception on a 64-yard bomb, but you can't trust Keon Coleman in your lineup at this point of the season. Amari Cooper is all over the place. I mean, he had his 14 target game 2 weeks ago, but then he gives you a goose egg outright this week. I mean, again, you cannot trust Amari Cooper in your lineup in the slightest. But Khalil Shakir, you can, because Khalil Shakir has given you 7+ targets now in 7 consecutive games, 15+ fantasy points in 3 of his last 4, and he's caught 2 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks as well. He is like, again, we're talking about poster child for flex play. It's Khalil Shakir.
Agreed.
Nothing more you want to add? It was that simple. We can move on.
No, I mean, yeah, we can move on.
Okay, great. Again, I don't. We have Demario Douglas. People on YouTube will see we have Demario Douglas in the sit-em tier, and that's just like, don't get cute. He literally 3 receptions for 11 yards last week. He got bailed out by a touchdown.
That doesn't look like Hunter Henry.
Because Hunter Henry's at tight end. The Jacksonville Jaguars travel to Vegas to take on the Raiders. You and I both have Brian Thomas Jr. as a must start. It was our co-host Cameron Lawrence, where if he's not talking about Jerry Jeudy, if he's not talking about JSN, he's talking about Brian Thomas Jr., and he couldn't even make him a must start. You and I are must start clear at this point. With Mac Jones, he's getting the volume. It's all Brian Thomas Jr. I see people on Twitter talking like, man, the wide receiver one in this class might have been Brian Thomas Jr. Those ain't memes anymore. Man. The conversation can be had.
No.
What?
We literally did this earlier this year when he went 21 and 23.
He's been phenomenal. I'm not saying, look, for this year, yes, Brian Thomas Jr. has, I still think Malik Nabers is probably going to end up being the best wide receiver in this class based on what we've seen so far. He's just drew the short end of the stick here with Drew Lock at quarterback, right? But man, Brian Thomas Jr. has looked the part. Like, I mean, he's doing everything, man. He's beating zone. He's beating man. It doesn't matter if his quarterback is Mac Jones or Trevor Lawrence with half a shoulder. He's getting it done. He's a must start. No questions asked.
He's a must start. I can't go as far to be like, actually, he could have been the wide receiver one.
No, I'm with you. I'm not going that far. I'm just saying, like, those hold more weight than I think people want to actually willingly give it right now.
Again, I'm not saying I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying as a must start. I just think
the
fantasy community likes to swing the pendulum so far to one side. I'm just like,
totally. I'm with you on that. I'm just saying that the conversation holds some weight of like Brian Thomas. His film is awesome. His film is so good. I'm not going to keep ignoring that portion either. He's getting it done in fantasy. He's a must start. He's going to turn out to be a phenomenal NFL wide receiver. He's going to be a star.
Let's just get him a good offensive coach.
Yes, 100% agree on that front. Jacoby Myers, we have him as a flex here. You had him listed as a fine start, Ty. Why is that? I'm just not as optimistic because the volume hasn't really been panning out for Jacoby Myers. He has been getting 6 in targets per game over the last 4 weeks, 10 and 10.8 per game. But the wide receiver 7, the wide receiver 25, the wide receiver 28, the wide receiver 36 in those games. That to me just screams flex play.
Sure. I think it is because I think that Aiden O'Connell does play this week, which is probably one of the bigger chunks of the pie here.
Yep.
The other part of this too is just that this Jacksonville passing defense is just not good.
Oh, it's
I mean, since week 9, this Jacksonville defense teams are they oh my word. Offenses are doing really well against this Jacksonville secondary.
There it is.
I think part of that you could look at last week and be like, well, if Aaron Rodgers could do really well, look, teams can throw against Jacksonville. And I think Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, the same. These two guys will continue to feast with these kind of matchups.
Fair enough. Jacoby Myers just screams flex, but if you want to give a little bit of a bump because of the matchup with the Jags and Aiden O'Connell potentially being back, I don't know how much of a bump I'm willing to give Jacoby Myers because of Aiden O'Connell of all quarterbacks. Go ahead. What you can whisper in your mic. We can have a whispering conversation.
Hey, some of us really need Jacoby Myers to step up this week.
That's what this is about. I knew it. Hey, I wasn't going to say it because I got no skin in that game. I know you're just trying to get to the championship after Cameron knocked me out to face him. Well, I'm assuming Cameron wins this week. I really want him to lose in the semis for the third straight year. Oh man, it's great to rip him when he's not on the episode, man. But I get that. Some people do need Jacoby Myers to pull through for them this week, and you are indeed one of those people. The San Francisco 49ers visit the Miami Dolphins. Deebo Samuel.
Nope.
Screw you, man.
I'm surprised you got him as a weak flex.
I was tempted to make him a sit. I was very, very tempted, but
I just changed it to sit him. I'm surprised that we have him here. I'm kind of embarrassed by that, actually.
He's like bottom of this tier. Like it is difficult to have Deebo Samuel in your lineup right now. I mean, if he can't even get it done after being a squeaky wheel, when he goes out and complains as much as he did, and then he drops a touchdown. Go ahead. You're giggling to yourself.
If you had to guess where Deebo Samuel ranks in points per game since week 12, where would you guess?
Wide receiver 95.
Oh, you're close.
Yeah,
He's wide receiver 89.
I know I'm close because it's been bad. Because it's been so bad. I did my homework before last episode when I decided to recklessly plant my flag on Deebo Samuel in the starts last week, and then he went out and just gave me the double birds. I mean, it hasn't been great, man. I'm well aware. Enough about Deebo, though, because you're really not looking to play him. He's like the weakest of flex plays this week. Jawan Jennings and Tyreek Hill both fall into the fine start tier. Tyreek Hill gave you 2 straight weeks of 20-plus points, but then really came back down to earth in what should have been a good matchup with the Houston Texans here. Where's your level of confidence with Tyreek? Because, yeah, it's weird to say he's not a must-start.
It sounds weird. It probably sounds incorrect to say that his production is going to be very dependent on Tua.
Yeah,
but
no,
I think
we saw that last week. 4 interceptions, and Tyreek had a terrible game.
Yeah, so it's different this year because if it felt like in years past that it didn't matter how bad Tua could play, like Tyreek was still going to be a very good play. But now that we've seen Tua kind of come back down to earth after last week, I think fine start is the right spot for him.
Jawan Jennings, fine start as well. This is a volume play, 100%, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Sunday Night Football, visit the Dallas Cowboys. Mike Evans, Ceedee Lamb, must starts. Mike Evans went for 159-2 on 9 receptions against the Chargers last week. And Ceedee Lamb, finally we saw the bounce back game. He had seen 6-7 and got bumped up to 13 targets last week. He's still been the wide receiver 14 or better in 4 of his last 5 games too. So Ceedee Lamb is locked into your lineup in a great matchup with the Buccaneers secondary that just cannot find a way to stay 100% healthy this year, still nursing their way back to health. The one wide receiver that's probably worth talking about is Jalen McMillan. So Jalen McMillan or Deebo Samuel this week?
Jalen McMillan.
I think I'm leaning Jalen McMillan too.
I wouldn't lean. I would plant my flag. I would die on that hill.
I mean, 18 plus in each of his last 2 weeks, 3 touchdowns in those 2 games, 4 for 59-2 against Vegas, 5 for 75-1 against the Chargers. I mean, he's getting involved here, man. It's not Mike Evans and Cade Otton. It's Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan here. We're really starting to see him shine.
I agreed. I'm still so embarrassed. I mean, can you change Deebo right now? I can't look at this and take it seriously.
I gotta re-upload the graphic, man.
No,
I gotta change it and re-upload the graphic.
Let me work on it while you talk.
We only got 1 more game left. If you want me to buy you time, I can tell the people to join our Discord. If you have more start sit questions, if you're wondering who should I be starting over Deebo Samuel this week, go ahead, join our Discord. Nearly 4,400 people are waiting there to answer your fantasy football questions. That is down to the description of the audio podcast or YouTube video you are listening to. I'm not going to buy you enough time here because we got to wrap up this episode.
Oh, shoot. I was just going to delete Debo and then upload the other ones.
The New Orleans Saints visit the Green Bay Packers. Little to no interest in Romeo Doubs or Christian Watson this week. This is Josh Jacobs written all over it. He has been too good recently, and with how bad this New Orleans Saints run defense has been, why are you going to waste Jordan Love's arm on this? Now, that being said, we said the same thing about the Ravens against the Giants, right? And then it ended up being a phenomenal day for Lamar Jackson. So now that I put that out into the universe where, I'm like, all right, Josh Jacobs 20 plus this week. It's going to be Jordan Love for 35 plus this week in fantasy. Jaden Reed, week flex play. We have him as a flex play, and he's like probably rightfully at the very end of the flex here for me.
Yeah, I would say flex. He's just he's a touchdown dependent wide receiver. He's got to score. If he doesn't, he's not worth playing. So if you think he scores, go ahead and play him. But I'm going to take my chances that he's not going to very often for the rest of the year.
Can I give you my MVS case as to why he should be a week flex and not a sit him this week?
It's a revenge game.
No, but thanks for giving me another talking point. No, I don't want to waste any words on MVS. Part of it is like he's 7+ targets each of his last 2 games. There is a case where if the Saints are chasing points in this game, we could see MVS get involved, but not with Spencer Rattler, a quarterback.
I was going to say we're banking on Spencer Rattler here. Let's
if we can't bank on DTR, we can't bank on Spencer Rattler. So MVS is rightfully in the sit-him tier. I wanted to see if I could actually convince you, and I'm like, no, there's literally nothing here for me that I can work with.
Hey, that being said, MVS is definitely going to hit my DFS lineup because
totally. Well, there we did a tie. 57 wide receivers, whether you should be starting, sitting, or flexing them in week 16. We did it in just about an hour. I'm really proud of ourselves on that one. Again, if you're not subscribed to the channel here, make sure you do that. Next week, abbreviated week, we are bringing you a starts and sits episode right at the start of the week. Christmas Eve, we'll be coming out with that right away because with Christmas travels and everything, we're just not going to be around our setup. We're only going to have time for recording at the very, very start of the week. So we're going to bring you a special early edition of 24 players that will change your week 17 outcome in fantasy football, the most important week of the year. So make sure to subscribe, turn on the notifications so you know when that video is up. We're also going live on Sunday as well. Ty will be hanging out with you. I believe it'll be you and I who are going live this week.
You bet.
Ty will be here with you on YouTube answering all of your fantasy football questions. So make sure you tune in and hang out with him to get your lineups fixed before week 16. If you want to follow us on the socials as well, FFL is on Twitter. The FFL is on Instagram. Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. No, Facebook and TikTok, technically on YouTube, but we're Fantasy Football Fellas Shorts on YouTube. I'm at Lucas Wenzel on X, Tyler_Plath for Tyler. Have a happy holiday weekend, y'all. I know it's not quite Christmas yet, or if you celebrate a holiday other than Christmas this time of the year as well, we recognize it's not quite the official celebration, but I digress. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. We will see you all next week before the holiday stretch. Deuces.